Hello ladies and gentlemen, Ollie here and welcome once again to one of these end of the week wrap-up diary type videos. There's actually quite a lot to get through this week. I've just finished the first week of block 3, that's brain and behaviour, so the neurology based block. It's pretty heavy content wise, but as we go through this video I'll tell you a bit more about that. And if you remember, last week I recorded the corresponding video on Sunday because I think I did weeks 13 and 14 together, so that makes this one 15 if I can count correctly. And I can't remember if I said, but I just finished my first day of bedside teaching. So what that means now, to put it in some context, is every week we have Friday fully in-hospital teaching at University Hospital Coventry in Warwickshire, UHCW as it's called, but now interwoven into the timetable, and I think this is true for the rest of the year, we have half a day a week of hospital teaching. That might change, I'm not sure, but I am based for my teaching, it's variable depending on exactly who you are, but I'm based in George Eliot Hospital in Nuneaton, which is a little ways north of Coventry, and actually getting there was a bit of a challenge because the public transport here kind of in this area is notoriously unreliable and quite poor, so you've always got to kind of plan in advance. And to get there by bus, I could get the bus to get to the hospital, but it's an hour and 20 minutes or something like that from Leamington. So what I ended up doing was getting the 7:15 train to Warwick, like the town of Warwick, which is kind of not anywhere near the university, meeting a course mate of mine who lives there, who very kindly offered to take me with her on her way. And so I went there, I got to Warwick for about 7:30, then we kind of wound our way up through Kenilworth to Coventry and then on to Nuneaton. We got there maybe 10 to 9, so it was quite a long journey, but we did get 5 of us there. And I did have some cool stuff to pick up, so I got my nifty little name badge. I'll have to keep this in the frame of focus, but it says Year 1 Clinical Skills 2, which is what we're studying now, with my name on it. And I'll just drop that down there. And I got a new ID badge, so currently, just so I have this, I can show you. This is my university student card. Then I have my NHS Trust card for UHCW, which is kind of security identity card, and then I got another one for the George Eliot Hospital Trust, and that obviously marks me as a medical student, lets me get into where I need to get to. So I'm accruing ID badges at an alarming rate, and you'll notice my keys are actually attached to that band, which is another story that will come towards the end of the video. So we had to do these induction courses, I guess, kind of online access courses to get you used to the hospital IT systems and summary care records, that kind of thing. So if you want to pull up relevant patient information, if a consultant asks us to do something, we can, or we can look at x-rays or CTs or anything like that, kind of relevant information we are being given full access to, like a nurse or another auxiliary healthcare team member would be. We now have that access to facilitate our learning, and it feels like a big responsibility, really. It's very obviously private personal information, and the results, the consequences if you misuse your access to that information are very, very severe. People get struck off registers for that kind of thing, so you really, I think, got to use it honestly and properly. So we went in the morning, we had our induction, we met some of the consultants and some of the doctors that work there, as well as our kind of core mentoring team, so the people that look after us. We got given lockers to store our things in, just kind of introduced to the building in general, and then we were split off into smaller groups and assigned a doctor to follow in groups of maybe 7 or 8, and then we went onto the ward. And it wasn't really like shadowing a consultant, I don't want to use that word, because we were very involved in the process. So our consultant that we were following, who was a super nice guy, by the way, really, really supportive and wanted us to get as involved as possible. So he took us onto the ward and said, he kind of got all our names. We introduced ourselves, and then he sort of went, Oliver, referring to me, I want you to go and talk to that patient over there. So we were very much kind of thrown at the deep end, but he had us, between us, take a history, which I started, and then we took a general physical exam as well. We were shown how to do a neurological exam, which was important for the condition that the patient had. And the patient was really lovely as well. Clearly, wanted us to learn, was happy for us to kind of get things wrong and not do things perfectly. But we were taken step by step through performing this new exam, which was really cool, given that we've just started the neurology block. It did hit home, I do want to say. It was quite a heavy first case, and I'm really conscious of what I'm about to say. I'm trying to keep identifiable information out of this, but the patient had 2 paralysed limbs as the result of their condition. That's probably vague enough. I think that's a normal thing you would see on a neurology ward. And it was my job at the end of the consult, when we were about to go, to wrap up with ideas, concerns and expectations, which is how we are taught to end our kind of patient history taking sessions. And as I say, it was really heavy because the patient, I don't think, due to one thing or another, didn't seem to fully appreciate the magnitude of kind of what their condition was. And they said that they just hoped that they could get everything fixed and for things to go kind of back to normal and so they could go home. And that, we kind of looked around the group between us, because in this state, that was not going to happen. There was very, very little chance, if any, of that happening. And it was hard hitting, but it was an incredibly good learning experience. I'm really grateful to the consultant for getting us that involved in the process. We learned a lot in a very short space of time. And all the staff at the hospital were incredibly supportive, and they encouraged us to come back in our own time and just talk to the patients and do our own kind of interviews with them, just to get used to the process. Because for me, I've got no ward experience at all. All of mine was either rural centre based or through Nightline, so it was based in the university campus. I've never had any direct ward based experience before, so it's all new to me. So because I'd had half a day of bedside teaching on Monday morning, Tuesday was a half day for me. The other half of the year were, I think, they must have been either at UHCW or George Eliot. Maybe some people are at Warwick Hospital, but I've not spoken to any that are. They had their bedside teaching Tuesday afternoon, so we only had Tuesday morning in lectures. Not a lot happened on Tuesday, it was all lecture based, but the speed at which the content is coming through in this block, it's a little bit frightening. Even though we only had, I think, 3 lectures, it's a lot of new anatomy. As someone's put it to me, neuroanatomy, there's a lot you don't need to learn. There's an enormous amount that you could learn, but the focus of our course, because it's an accelerated program, is only really the anatomy that's clinically relevant. You can learn more if you want to. Like, I enjoy learning more with most systems because I like the intricacy of it and the kind of aesthetic beauty of anatomy. But with the brain, there's such an enormous amount, and all of it is new to me. I've done kind of nerve physiology and things like that. I did a molecular biology degree, but the actual anatomy and the complexity of the brain, as you would imagine, is pretty unbelievable. And the lecturers were asking questions of us, and the room would go quiet for like 10 seconds because none of us were, we were always like 3 or 4 slides behind where the lecture was. But thankfully there are 2 or 3 people on the course who do have neuroscience backgrounds, a couple of which I think have worked in neuroscience, so thankfully they were able to answer the questions and keep things going. And so because Wednesday afternoons are reserved for sport, revision or other activities, I had another half day. So in the morning we had 3 lectures. If I remember, they were imaging. One was study design, and the other, and I definitely didn't just look at my phone, was neuroendocrinology. And I just remember the clinical imaging talk. So we get taught by the same lecturer for clinical imaging and anatomy, because I guess for all intents and purposes they fall under the same bracket. But the reason it stuck with me is that it used images from a police case. We were talking about trauma, like cranial trauma, so kind of blunt force impact on the side of the head, and there were all of the investigative photos, and it really put it in a kind of beyond a clinical context. It was more like, not forensics, but they were like post-mortem stage photos, and you could really see the extent of the injury and the way the bleeding had happened and things like that, and it was taken through very slowly and explained, and it was a really good way of illustrating it, I thought. Gory pictures, they don't bother me personally. I know some people don't necessarily like going straight in for kind of blood and guts photos in medical lectures if you don't need to, but at least for me personally, it means I remember them a bit better if something's a bit shocking. And when I start doing a bit more teaching of my own, it's something that I'm really going to think about including more, because I think most people find them interesting. We had a sock pop lecture, the one on study design, which, while it was interesting, again, and I bang on about this so much, but it suffered from the same problems that most of them seem to, which is the content is spread out over a slot that it really doesn't need to be. I'm in two minds about how I feel about the way sock pop is done, because, and that social and population perspectives, kind of the more sociology, the fluffier side, for want of a better phrase. What would be ideal is if they did them in like half an hour, quick fire lectures, but because a lot of them are done by either external speakers or people that don't teach us regularly, that would be very irritating, I think, for the uni to try and organise. But if they did that, I think more people would be inclined to go to them, because I did a rough head count during this lecture, and there was maybe 25% of the year there. And I think it's important to be honest about these things. Again, it's not that people skive, because they're probably all upstairs just revising something else, and it feels particularly kind of egregious in this case where we're under massive time pressure in block 3 to cover the amount of content, and to have time spent on things that it doesn't need to be spent on just feels a bit of a drag, unfortunately. Wednesday afternoon I also got registered with a GP finally. I have not registered with a new GP since either my first or second year of my undergraduate degree at Newcastle, which I started in 2014. And I've been to the GP once since then to get a vaccination. But I'm pretty bad myself for actually going to the doctors if there's something wrong with me, by which I mean I don't go until things get really bad. Don't do that. If you're suffering, go to the doctor. I also need to find a dentist, an NHS dentist, because I was going to a place privately in Newcastle that was very cheap. I think a lot of students went there, but again, I haven't been in years now, and I really need to go. Also, go to the dentist, have your checkups, it's very important. But anyway, I registered at Sherburn Medical Centre, which is kind of close to the parade in Leamington. It was maybe 10-12 minutes walk from the house. The staff that I spoke to were absolutely lovely. So if you're in Leamington, or if you move down here to come study at Warwick, firstly, come find me and say hi or buy you a coffee. But secondly, register at Sherburn Medical Centre. I really can't recommend them highly enough. They were so helpful. I just had to stop and start my recording because there's some arsehole with a motorbike revving it really loudly and going up and down Kenilworth Road. So it's like 4 minutes later since the last clip. I was waiting for him to go away. Thursday morning we started a new CBL case, so our first CBL case of the block. We had a new facilitator who was actually in this case my clinical teacher from the last block. So the doctor that was teaching me clinical skills on the Friday at UHCW is now my CBL facilitator. But he was pretty content to just let us get on with things. And I think at this point, I mean, I really like my CBL group, and I think we're pretty good at guessing what we need to cover and doing doing good work outside of CBL so we're able to teach one another. It's such a valuable part of the process for me. I know everyone doesn't like it. I should rephrase that. Not everyone likes it, but personally I think as a group we gel really well. And again, we kind of in the first session, so we get 3 sessions per case, the Thursday, the following Monday, and then the Wednesday, we just identify, we kind of look at it from what's normal in terms of being relevant to the case. So for any systems or physiology or anatomy that we can identify is involved in the case, before we do anything, we've learnt to ignore the pathology because it's very tempting just to focus on that. We do what is normal, what should be normal, and how should it work normally, because CBL is, it's not, and actually our tutor put it this way, it's not teaching us how to practice medicine, if that makes sense. That's not the point. The point at the moment is to put into practice what we've learned in class. And obviously, therefore, it presents a really good opportunity to go over what we've done and consolidate it using our own diagrams and things like that. There was also a tutorial session for Medline, which is kind of it's a way of, it's a service for looking for research papers, essentially, that you think are relevant. I was a bit confused as to why the uni did a compulsory session on this, because I feel like virtually anyone with a science degree, I think the vast bulk of people that apply for medical courses are going to come from a life sciences or natural sciences background at the very least, and will therefore probably be familiar with PubMed or other paper searching tools. And I know that Warwick obviously accepts people from arts backgrounds as well, and so for them it's really important to show them how to do that, but I think it should have been made like an optional small side session or something like that. But what the hey, did it, you know, got on with it, it's fine. And the rest of Thursday, it was really interesting because it kind of focused on pain, in terms of what we mean by pain. So there was one lecture on, I think it was called Pain as a Clinical Entity, with an external consultant. And we also had one on analgesics, and that was so cool as well, all the different pain-killing medication and their modes of action. There's such an extensive list, but all the side effects and interactions and things like that I found really intriguing. And I think, I mentioned this on my blog, maybe the reason I found it so interesting was because I'm an enormous fan of Henry Marsh's books. So he's a neurosurgeon. I think I have one of them on the shelf behind me, if not both of them. And he spends a lot of time in his books, because he's a neurology based surgeon, about what pain is. And I asked people in my mock interviews that I was doing, what is pain? That was one of the quickfire questions I sometimes ask people, because you can approach it from a physiological perspective or a psychological one, and all the different consequences and different types of pain. It's a really deep subject. It sounds a bit weird on the surface, but it's very good once you get into it. Friday, back at UHCW, so standard teaching day in hospital, but the order of things was reversed. So now I have clinical teaching in the morning, and I have a really, really cool new clinical tutor. In fact, I'm pretty sure I can tell you who it is, Dr. Gill, who, if you go on Warwick's YouTube channel, is the guy who does all the exemplary examination videos. And when we're practicing for OSCEs, we all watch his videos and make notes and things. So it's really cool to have him as a clinical tutor. Very, very good teacher. And then in the afternoon, I had an anatomy seminar and anatomy. We haven't started radiology yet, but we will in weeks 3, 4, and 5. And so it was all about nerves and very, very intricate and neuroanatomy. Actually, by the end of the day on Friday, I was feeling a bit more confident with the anatomy, the ascending and descending pathways and the thalamus and all these different bits and bobs we're doing. I probably sound like an idiot to any of you who know anything about neuroanatomy, but there was quite a good double-length station in the anatomy workshop where you were given like a diagram of a body and coloured pieces of string, and you had to map out certain nerve pathways going from limbs up to the centres in the brain where they're processed. And it was really useful, good teaching technique. It's so weird as well looking at a brain, one of the plastinated specimens, because you look at them and it's like, that's a person. Everything that kind of really makes a person and not just like a flesh automaton is in there. This thing that's maybe, I mean, what, the size of 2 fists? I think they said, my colleague Ryan, who has an anatomy degree, said your heart is approximately the size of a fist, the brain maybe 2 fists. They're really not that big, the ones that we had. They are dried out, I suppose, but God, it's very weird, because you can pick them up and stuff. Like, that is everything that a person is. Friday, I also lost my house key, which is a stupid thing to do. Thankfully, I was able to go back to the uni. They were able to give me a spare, which I have to take back tomorrow, and I have to contact my landlord about getting a replacement one, so I can either have a new one cut myself and pay for it myself, or they'll do it for me and I'll pay a charge, which is fine. But I just hope that it woven into my contract somewhere there isn't some ridiculous surcharge applied to these things, like 50 quid or 70 quid that I've seen in other people's contracts. It's just madness, particularly when there's no identifiable information on the key. So yesterday, Saturday, I got some shopping done, kind of tidied up in my room, and I actually went to Leamington Library. It was really lovely. It's down by the Pump Room Gardens, kind of towards where the bridge is, where you'd cross into the south side of the town, and went in, introduced myself to the kind of librarian that was on at the time. She was really lovely, showed me around, and I'm going to get registered there so I can take books out. Always go to your local library, they're a really good place to be. And I studied for 3 or 4 hours there, just doing more anatomy and Anki cards. And today, again, me and Emily both went into uni about 10 o'clock. We came home at 5, had lunch in the Dirty Duck, which is a pub on main campus. The food was really lovely, and you get a 10% discount if you... That ID badge I showed you earlier, the uni one, it acts as like a payment card in the places where you can eat, and you get a 10% discount. So I topped up the card, then used that to pay for my food. Got a discount, which was really nice. We had fish and chips. And it's been a really productive day today, so realistically did 5 or 6 hours. I need to prepare a presentation for CBL tomorrow before I go to bed, but otherwise I'm going to have a reasonably early night, and my 4:30 AM get up routine should still proceed, and my screens have just gone off, so that's about where I should end. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Please be sure to hit that like button for me, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more of these videos, and don't forget to go and check out PostGradMedic.com for a bunch of free resources for medical applicants. You can go and read my daily blog of med school life here at the University of Warwick, and you can get in touch. Let me know how things are going with your applications. I know interviews are happening at the moment. Very, very good luck, as ever, to those of you that I've spoken to about your interviews. And hi once again to the people I saw at Warwick. Take care, guys, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye for now.